Welcome to another episode of Chat Sports. How you guys know? My name's Chad. Take a dive on sports, and welcome to the College Football Week 13 recap video. This is pretty much the final regular season games for almost 99.9% of the football programs out there. A lot of these games that I went over the last video was determine who got in a conference championship game to continue their season and possibly in playoff hopefuls. And there's quite a few interesting games out there, including those that had a wider effect on everything as well in terms of the landscape as a whole. And I'll go over the PowerPoint Index Top 25, the new poll I have. I'll go over my Eliminator scenario. And then, once again, preview what a 12-team playoff format will look like with the current setup. Before I dive into all that, if you could, go ahead and hit that thumbs up for me, especially if the kind that provides you. Really pleases you two guys. Really help out the channel out. You also subscribe. Love you guys review my work. I love you all for doing that. Not many of you subscribe. It'll cost you a dime. Helps me provide more time value for you. Now, going over it, last week, I was unprecedented when I went undefeated. I told you I would not duplicate that this week. And it was pretty much true right at the gate. One of my first picks got lost. So, no back-to-back undefeated weeks. But I did have double-digit wins. I went amazing 10-3. That's right, I had 13 games last week. 12 of them tied in with a conference championship bids. One was kind of like a playoff eliminator. And I'll just kind of go down the list of all these games. And there are some great games that happened that really hampered a lot of things, a lot of games people didn't think would really transpire. Like North Carolina losing again. Let's go ahead and start off with the first one on my slate. And that was to determine who was going to host the American Championship game. That was a battle between Tulane and Cincinnati. The winner of this game would be the number one team in the ACC, or AAC, should I say, excuse me. And it'll depend on what UCF did later on, depending if the loser was also in it. UCF was playing South Florida, and spoilers, UCF had no issues with that. So this was a game to determine who was going to host UCF. Now I went with Cincinnati on this one just because they were playing at home. Both these programs are kind of built very eerily similar. But Cincinnati's defense could not stop Spears. He was just a running fool, and he just decimated the Bearcats with 181 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. They had no answers for him. Pratt was just a decent quarterback. He didn't really have to do much. He just handed the ball off. As it was pretty much, they went neck for neck for 3 quarters. It was the first quarter that was the deciding factor, believe it or not. That's when Tulane put up 3 points, and that was all the difference it was in this game as they went back and forth. And it was like Tulane had to come back to win the game, and they did with a 30-yard touchdown pass. 27-24. Tulane goes first ever conference championship game in program history. Last time they won a conference, there was no conference championship game in Conference USA. That's when they went undefeated. Many moons ago. And they'll play host to UCF to pretty much say, okay, if Tulane wins that one, they'll probably end the New York Six Bowls. I'll just throw that out there. But I went Cincinnati because they were playing at home. Tulane went in and said, nope, this is my house. And knocked out the Bearcats. And even more disappointing news for Bearcat fans, Fickle is no longer head coach of the Bearcats. He's now accepted head coaching duties at the University of Wisconsin. After he would not leave after their undefeated run last year. He said he was building something here, and now he turned around and left anyways. So Austin, where the Longhorns playing host to Baylor. Right now, the Texas program right now is just, they've had flashes of what they can be and flashes of what they still are. And Baylor right now is a program on the decline, especially from last year's great run. this year they just can't seem to win close games. Or win games a lot of times they already get blown out or like I said, close games, whatnot. But for the Longhorns, everything went through Robinson, which it should be because he's a bruising running back. Almost 180 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. I mean, now he was more like the deciding factor in terms of, how this was going to go. I said it's going to be pretty close between the Bears come all through the Longhorns, but it's going to be a Longhorn stampede towards the end, and that's basically what it was. I mean, it was a 19-17 Bears halftime lead, but that was it. Texas ended up winning 38-27, get themselves 8-4, number 3 in the conference. We'll get more on that later. And then one game that no one saw coming. Nebraska went to Iowa City. And this one, I was going to Iowa City because Iowa had their destiny in their hands. Win and they're in. That was it. If they beat Nebraska, they were going to Indianapolis, take on the winner of Michigan and Ohio State. Somebody forgot to tell that to Iowa. Everyone else in the nation knew, except for the University of Iowa. Nebraska came in there up 17-0 at the half. Casey Thompson was just phenomenal. Over 270 yards, 3 touchdowns in the air. Palmer received 165 yards and 2 of those touchdowns. Nebraska was just lighting them up. I mean, the key aspect for Hawkeyes was the running attack, where Johnson almost had 110 yards at a touchdown. But it was already too late by the time they started scoring. I mean, 17-0 at half by Nebraska, 24-7 heading to the fourth quarter. Iowa's defense finally was able to shut out Nebraska. The offense was doing some movement, but was a little too late. Nebraska upends Iowa's Big Ten title hopes, beating them in the Battle of Heroes rivalry series 24-17, and end the season on a high note for Nebraska because it has also been announced that Matt Rule is now the new head coach of the Cornhuskers, formerly the Carolina Panthers head coach. I said he would be done in Carolina, heading back to college. Remember, he resurrected the Temple football program. He resurrected the Baylor football program. The Cornhuskers are expecting it to be a third time's a charm type of thing. If Matt Rule can get back to his recruiting roots and build that program up once again, they could turn Big Red around. But Nebraska ends their season on a high note. Not bowl eligible, but they ruin Iowa's chances at Big Ten glory. Then we head out to the Coliseum out there in L.A. where the Trojans playing host to Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame is just one of these schools that all of a sudden just start playing well. They're just beating ranked opponents like they were nothing. Syracuse, Clemson, North Carolina. I mean, these are schools that I did not give them any shot at. I think I gave them a shot against North Carolina, but I gave them no shot against Syracuse and Clemson. And they just took it to them. Notre Dame is unfortunately a one-dimensional team. They're a run-first offense. They have a wonderful front line and running attack that could do that. And Pine can show brilliances here and there to make some decent decisions and find receivers, especially when you have a NFL-bound tight end Mayer, who ended up having almost 100 yards, 2 touchdowns on the day. But Caleb Williams was just on another level. And even though he's not one of these guys that really believes in his own hype, like other Heisman recipients in the past have kind of just soaked in the hype and just kind of went with it and it turned out to be a huge bust in the NFL. Manziel is a prime example of that one. Caleb Williams has shown a little bit of a humility when it comes to that type of aspect. I think with the performance here today against the Irish, I think Caleb Williams should solidify his selection as a Heisman winner. USC has put themselves in pristine position to make the playoffs, getting the Pac-12, someone in there that hasn't been there any quite a few years, actually, since the Pac-12 has made an appearance. Is when these conferences get pretty much underrepresented. Them and the Big 12 both kind of go. But we went to play. I mean, it was the first quarter really kind of decided the whole factor. When USC went up 10-0, they didn't look back. I mean, even though the fourth quarter was a nice offensive showdown between the two, going back and forth. But USC ended up winning 38-27. Like I said, putting themselves in a pristine position to make the playoffs. And the party will find themselves at number 4 in the committee selection. It all depends what happens in Vegas as they head to the Pac-12 championship. Then we head to Columbus, where Ohio State was playing host to Michigan in their annual grudge match between the two. That's probably one of the best football rivalries in the nation. Because you see more times where these two are always seem to be higher ranked, or someone has a potential of being voted as number 1 or national champion, and the other one comes in and ruins the day. That's what these two kind of do to each other. Once again, they're ranked in the top 5, undefeated. Can Harbaugh make it 2 in a row against Day in this rivalry series? This is one thing Harbaugh had a hard time doing throughout his coaching tenure in Michigan, is beat Ohio State. He shed that monkey last year. He's looking to keep him away this year. And there was a lot of question marks headed for Michigan in this one. And I was also one of those that kind of questioned Michigan. Could they be successful without Gorham? We all forgot about Donovan Edwards. He had over 200 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns, all by his lonesome. C.J. Stroud for Ohio State made his case for the Heisman. Almost had 350 yards in the air and 2 touchdowns. However, it was Michigan that just lit it up in the fourth quarter, running off 21 points. The defense just shut out Ohio State the second half. They were down 20-17 at halftime. They didn't look back after that. It was all Michigan second half. They just decimated Ohio State. Win the Columbus, into the shoe. Michigan beat Ohio State for a second year in a row, 45-23, heading back into the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. Once again, pretty much, I think, guaranteeing their selection in the playoff. I highly doubt they will lose the Big Ten championship game. Then we head out into the Civil War of Oregon, between Oregon State and Oregon. And this is the game that I said this is going to be Oregon State. Because I thought the the Pac-12 championship ran between 2 programs, Oregon and Washington. Boy, was I wrong. But Oregon State is one of these teams you cannot overlook. Period. They're a well-coached team. They find ways to be successful. They don't have a lot of offensive weaponry surrounding this program, but they have the right talent, the right mindset, the right coaching. They do make games close. They give the big-time programs in the conference trouble. They can't close them out like they did with I think it was like USC earlier in the year. They just couldn't close them out, and it couldn't come from behind. Not this day. But the funny thing is, it was a comeback victory by the Beavers. I mean, heading into the fourth quarter, it was a 31-17 lead. 31-17. But Oregon just completely collapsed in that fourth quarter. Martinez for the Beavers had over 100 yards rushing. As the Beavers came from behind, almost shut out Oregon in the fourth. And they only had them 3 points. Beating the Ducks 38-34. pretty much almost eliminating Oregon in the Pac-12 championship contention. All depend what happened in the Apple Cup, which I'll explain that whole situation when I get to that game. But everyone was shocked about this game, except this guy. I picked the Beavers to beat the Ducks. Giving me my third win so far. So that's kind of move on to the Sunflower Showdown out there in Manhattan, Kansas, between K-State and Kansas. This is one of these games that also determine who is going to go into Arlington and take on TCU. K-State need to win this because Michigan won earlier against Baylor, which, because if K-State would have lost, Texas would have got in. That's how weird and freaky this type of scenario is, and K-State did not disappoint. They jumped up 23-7 in the first quarter. It was getting rowdy early and often. Vaughn had over 200 yards combined in a touchdown. Howard for the Wildcats over 200 yards in the air and 2 touchdowns, as he channeled his inner Martinez and actually ran a few times. K-State was able to outduel Kansas, beat them 47-27, en route to a rematch with the Horned Frogs down there in Arlington next weekend for the Big 12 title. Now we head over to the Apple Cup over there in Pullman, Washington, between Washington State and Washington, and one of these key matchups in the Pac-12 title race. And Washington's looking at this game, it's like, we're not going to lose to our in-state rival. And Penix Jr. Almost had 500 yards passing. He was like, I'm not on my watch, good sir. I am just going to throw the rock and you will catch it. Yes, good. Ozune had over 150 yards in the air on the touchdown. At Washington was way too much for Washington State. I mean, even though the first half was close, I will grant you that one. It was only 28-27, a Washington lead. But it was a second half fury. That was it. Washington pulls away 51-33 to take the victory against their arch rival. Going 7-2 in the conference, 10-2 overall, but yet not in the conference championship game. That honor, thanks to Oregon State, plus some other. Let's go over some of these scenarios. Utah was the one on the outside looking in because they had to have a lot of factors go their way for them to get in there. The one was Oregon State beat Oregon. So it didn't matter what happened with Washington State. As long as I think Washington won, they still got in. Because UCLA beat Cal, and then Utah beat Colorado. But because the combined winning percentage of Utah's victories was greater than the other two, Utah got the nod to rematch against USC, which kind of like that little storyline there. I think it's a scenario you're going to run into further on down the line, especially with the ACC next season. They're scrapping their divisions and going with a 3-5-5 model. These are issues you're going to run into when it comes to this. Is like, who do you take in this aspect? And in actuality, if they were back in divisions, it would have been Washington taking on USC. So, I don't know. Then we head there to Mobile, Alabama, one of the key Sun Belt games for the Sun Belt West to find out who's going to be the other participant in the conference championship game. Where South Alabama was playing host to Old Dominion, and I've said this has been South Alabama have no issues. Once again, I got kind of wrong on this one. South Alabama struggled. They were on the struggle bus early. Old Dominion jumped up on them 20-13 at halftime. But the Jaguars defense clamped down, caged the Monarchs in the second half where they shut them out. And South Alabama was able to muster enough of points to get in there, to get them ahead 27-20 to put pressure on Troy to find out who was going to host the Sun Belt since James Madison up in Coastal Carolina. But before we find out that, let's go ahead down to Boca Raton, Florida, where Florida Atlantic's playing host to Western Kentucky. Uh, Florida Atlantic's looking to try to become bowl eligible. Western Kentucky was staying in there trying to see if they could take on UTSA in back-to-back championship games. Another game kind of had to fall the right way for them to make it, but they need this win to put the pressure on North Texas. And this was a good game towards the end. They just kept battling back and forth, making key plays on defense, making some great offensive maneuvering. McCammon had over 120 yards for the Owls and 2 touchdowns, while Reed for Western Kentucky had over 400 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. So this was definitely a great matchup between these two programs. And, of course, it went to overtime. Why not? I mean, it makes perfect sense. Florida Atlantic had no issues scoring their touchdown. Western Kentucky had their opportunity. They scored. And they risked it for the biscuit. I mean, at this point in time frame in the season, it's why not? Your offense is humming. I mean, Reed is just putting up phenomenal numbers for you. Corley was just another outstanding aspect for the Hilltoppers, over 120 yards receiving and caught 2 of those 3 touchdowns from Reed. And they went for 2. And they got it. They got the 2-point conversion, got the victory. I mean, as well knows, we're all in. And they won it. Beating FAU 32-31 to put pressure on North Texas to find out who's going to San Antonio. So let's just go ahead and dive in that game right now. We have the Denton, Texas, where the North Texas Mean Green playing host to the Rice Owls. Once again, Rice is taking on another team that has the opportunity to make it punch their ticket to Conference USA Championship game, because they lost last week to UTSA when they clinched their spot. They already lost to Western Kentucky, so all 3 teams that are in contention for this title had to go through Rice. That's just bad things for Rice right there. But Patchett that made a game of this. It was tied 14 all at the half. Rice was not going to go away without a fight. Like I said, Patchett almost had 230 yards in the air, only 1 touchdown. Ragsdale for the Mean Green had over 120 yards rushing and a touchdown. So there were some key aspects in terms of the offensive numbers trying to get in there. The defenses were doing their part, stifling, maybe call up a huge play here or there. And North Texas barely beat Rice 21-17. Punched their ticket to San Antonio, take on the Roadrunners for the Conference USA title. Of course, these are 2 future members heading to the American, so we'll kind of see how this one kind of plays out. But that was a close game for the Mean Green. We'll see what happens next week. Then we have to Bloomington, Indiana, where the Hoosiers are playing host to the Boilermakers. If Purdue wins, they're in. Since Iowa ended up losing to Nebraska. And they had to win this one because there's still a slight chance of Illinois getting to the dance, since they, routed Northwestern. But if you're watching the game and looking at it late in the first quarter, it was Dexter Williams just running around. Next thing you know, he just drops. Possibly he planted his right leg and he went in a different direction. His leg stayed there. Nothing came of it was about how serious it was. He'd already come off of another major injury anyways. Losing him was just like I said, a death nail to the Boilermakers, as they could not. Basilic was going back as a starter, but he tried his best with over 200 yards passing, but he had an interception and a pick. As Purdue was able to hold on, beat Indiana, retained one of the oldest trophies out there, the old wooden bucket, beating the Hoosiers 30-16, and punching their ticket to Indianapolis to take on Michigan. Now, speaking of the Big Ten, I think the Big Ten needs to go away from these divisions. Why do you not have Michigan and Ohio State going at it? I mean, that right there will make great television. to have those two go at it again. But that's something you kind of think of down the road. And finally, we head down to Arkansas State, where the Red Wolves playing host to the Detroit Trojans. And this is one of the final games for the Sun Belt, as Troy needed to win this game to make it in. And Blackman and the Red Wolves were trying their best. I mean, he had 220 yards passing, but he didn't throw in the pick. It was all vital. That was just being a huge factor for the Trojans. They ended up having over 200 yards in the air, 4 touchdowns, as Troy just routed Arkansas State behind a 34-point fourth quarter, beating them 48-19 to be able to have the privilege of hosting Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt Championship. And taking my week to a 10-3. With that being said, let's just go ahead and just dive right into the Eliminator. As you see, this new format, I broke it down. Your top teams are your undefeated. The next one, I think these are the ones that have the better opportunities of making it. And then the ones at the bottom, I think, are out. But I haven't quite made that, got to the point where I am going to just completely eliminate them. So, as we look at this aspect, we all know Michigan beat Ohio State, so it means there's only 3 undefeated teams left. LSU losing to Texas A&M eliminates them. Oregon losing to Oregon State eliminates them. North Carolina losing to NC State eliminates them. And Coastal Carolina getting their second loss eliminates the Chanticleers as the group of 6 representative. Now, I still think Washington, Penn State, Alabama, and Tennessee are all well on the outside. So looking at what I have as an eliminator, here is what I am looking at as the 4 in. That's Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and USC. And if all of these teams went out, I think it'd be no question these 4 will make it into the playoffs. The next 2 I got out, I have Ohio State, which is the only one-loss team remaining, in Tennessee. But looking at the bottom 4 here, these guys I think really have no chance, even though Alabama's the question mark. But I have Clemson, Penn State, and Washington. Penn State and Washington do not play a title game. This is Alabama, and there does Tennessee. Penn State's the 3rd team in the Big Ten East. Washington should be in the Pac-12 championship, but they're not. Both Alabama and Tennessee are number 2 in the division. And then Clemson only has 2 losses. And they still have to play North Carolina in the ACC championship game. So that's why I still think Clemson probably has a little bit of shot here. But I think in the eyes of the committee, Clemson is gone. I think Penn State's gone. Washington's gone. It's going to be a debate between Tennessee and Alabama. I really think it is. But I think Tennessee deserves it more than Alabama because Tennessee beat them. Sorry. But you never know what happens because Georgia has to play LSU. Michigan has Purdue. TCU has K-State. And USC has Utah. TCU and USC probably had the biggest threats. Which I think if either one of them loses, I think Ohio State gets in. If both lose, do you keep TCU? Do you keep USC? Do you throw in Alabama just because it's Alabama? And I think that's the reason why Alabama's kind of considered because it's brand name. But I'll give my high horse on that one. I think it's just SEC bias. So my opinion when it comes to the committee assignments, because you got to think it's 13 people. It's human beings. They go off with the name brands. And they go off the ones that will draw in the fans, the money. And that's what ultimately drives the decision. But let's just go ahead and go to my PowerPoint index. Start up at number 25. This will refine Notre Dame, dropping 10 slots with their loss to USC. NC State creeps in there number 24, jumping up 7 spots. Coastal Carolina still maintaining a position in the Power Index 25, only dropping to 23 with their loss to James Madison. Texas creeps up to number 22. UTSA up 1. UCLA also up 1. Tulane drops to 19, or jumps up to number 19, excuse me, after beating Cincinnati. Ahead of them is Oregon State. With a nice big jump after beating Oregon. North Carolina drops to 16 after losing in overtime fashion at home to NC State. 15, I have Utah. They still have that date with USC, so we'll see what happens there. Ahead of them is Oregon at 14. And 13 is Florida State. Now for the top 12. LSU drops to 8 after losing to A&M. So it kind of makes the SEC championship game not as high profile once was. K-State, they're at number 11, making a nice huge jump up 7 slots. Cracking the top 10 is Washington, which, like I said, should be in the Pac-12 championship game. Sitting there 10-2, jumped up 3 slots. Clemson drops to number 9 after getting snake bit by Rattler in South Carolina. Alabama's ahead of them at number 8. Up 2. Penn State maintains number 7. Tennessee shoots up to number 6 with their blowout win over Vanderbilt with their backup quarterback. USC's only up 1 to number 6. Ohio State drops to number 2 after losing to Michigan. TCU maintains. Michigan takes slot at 2, and Georgia's still number 1. Go ahead and look at what the formatted college football playoff picture would look like if it expanded to 12 teams. Right now, using a combined poll aspect of the AP coaches and the Power Index poll. And in that aspect, Georgia's still number 1 because all 3 of us had Georgia number 1. So they will be able to select which bowl game, which semifinal bowl game they will go to. And since Peach and Fiesta, of course they'll pick the Peach because they'll be at home. So the number 2 team, which is now Michigan, which is on all of our polls, will determine which quarterfinal bowl they'll go to. Now the quarterfinal bowl, the main ones I always picked out was the Gasparilla, the Texas, the Las Vegas, and LA Bowl. And since all 4 of them are major NFL sites that could host the game, the New Orleans Bowl was the 5th wheel that they could come in and replace one of those bowl games. And since this year's championship game is in SoFi Stadium in LA, home to LA Bowl is out. New Orleans Bowl is in. So Michigan would take the Gasparilla Bowl as their home, as their destination. So then Georgia would get New Orleans, USC would get Las Vegas, and TCU would get the Texas Bowl. So pretty much everyone else kind of got some home games. And so first round matchups, we'll have Washington taking on Penn State in Happy Valley. Into Warakatop, Clemson have to go to Tennessee. K-State will have to go down to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama, and Tulane will head to the Horseshoe to take on the Buckeyes. Now, looking at this aspect, yes, Kansas State becomes the first 3-loss program into the playoffs. Unfortunately, the current setup, you cannot avoid this, which kind of allows those who hate this program go, see, look what we're doing, allowing 3-loss teams in here. They shouldn't be in there. But if they win their conference, does that not change anything? I mean, you can still have Utah coming in here if they beat USC. Maybe North Carolina can get in there if they're beating Clemson. There's a few scenarios out there. Maybe having 2 Group of 5 conference champions in to negate any 3-loss teams get in there. That's also a possibility, but I doubt, Troy or Coastal can make that happen because both of them only have 2 losses. But next week, we got the all 10 conference championship games on the docket, plus 1 extra from the MAC. The Buffalo-Akron game that was delayed because of the blizzard hit Buffalo will be played next week. It looks like San Jose State, New Mexico State game will not be remade up. New Mexico State needs a game to make themselves bowl eligible. But as of right now, it doesn't look like that game is going to happen, which is unfortunate for New Mexico State, even though I don't think they'll beat San Jose State. But it'd be nice to see if the Aggies can actually make the bowl games. UConn became bowl eligible. Why not New Mexico State? But anyways, like I said, that's the game. That's the recaps. I provided my updated Eliminator video, my updated PowerPoint index poll, and the updated what the playoff 12 could look like if it was in effect this year. But let me know down below which game this past weekend shocked you the most. Was it Michigan winning Ohio State? Was it South Carolina snake biting, or Spencer Rattler snake biting another 10-win program? Which conference game are you looking forward to the most? Which one of the 4 possible playoff teams do you think will not make it or not survive next week? Just let me know in the comments below. While you're there, you hit that thumbs up once again. You go share this video with friends and family. It really helps promote this channel out. Once you subscribe, make sure you click that bell notification, turn on notifications, so let you know next time I post any more content on my channel. And I will see you next time on Chat Sports Talk.